scenes, strategizing, providing resources, responding to incidents, and clearing other collisions that are happening along the highway and up on the hillside next to the bridge. We are finding additional debris. So we're doing our best to pull it out as quickly as we can. We keep discovering more. We also have several trees, as you had heard earlier, several trees that have to come down. So we are trying to do everything at once, but pulling out that debris is a very difficult and time-consuming process.
One follow, if you don't mind. The condition of the roadway itself, as you're uncovering that, how does the road look?
I'll defer.
I was recently down at the scene, and remarkably, the roadway, as we can see it now, there is still quite a bit of dirt, and the heavy equipment is still over that major impact point. But as of right now, it looks like it held up fairly well. We still have to do our final examination on it, but we are happy so far with at least what we're seeing.
Can you describe the gouge and what exactly caused that? How deep and wide it is?
Right, I have not seen the gouge, and right where that would be is where that heavy machinery is.
If there's any inspection of the bridge, who does that fall to? Does that fall to WashDOT, or is that Amtrak, CNSS?
WashDOT bridge engineers have been on the scene. They have inspected the bridge. The bridge is owned by Sound Transit, and I'm sure that they will send people out as well to look at it. However, we have a vested interest in ensuring that the bridge is safe and sound, and that we can safely open the lanes to traffic. So our bridge inspectors were involved in that.
Is any of the debris that you guys are clearing up, are you taking any of that in as evidence from the wreck, or how is that working? Is it just all going somewhere else?
Right, that's again coordinated by NTSB, but the debris is being taken to the same place where all the rail cars are, and so I'm sure that will be inspected just as if it's evidence.
So NTSB is down there watching?
Yes, yes.
When you took us through the list of things that had to happen before the road was back open, I think the last phase was that assessment. That's done by DOT.
Correct.
Claudia, can you take us through what that assessment will consist of? Is it a simple walkthrough? I mean, what is that last step?
Well, we have engineers down there that are looking at the roadway, and they are also repairing guardrail that's obviously crushed. But our maintenance crews have a lot of experience looking at the status of a highway, and it's pretty obvious if you have damage to a road that's caused by this massive of a collision. And so they can tell pretty quickly whether the road needs extensive repairs or whether it's more minor maintenance type work that needs to be done. And fortunately, we are seeing that the gouge that you've been hearing about is in the shoulder, which is asphalt, and more easily repaired than the main line, which is concrete. And as you just heard, we're not seeing a lot of extensive damage at this point to the concrete.
Talked about the bridge itself and its impact on the roadway. Looking good at that point. Has there been any assessment that you're aware of on the rail line itself on the bridge?
The rail line is owned by Sound Transit, and they would be the ones responsible for that. I can also tell you that one of the repairs that we haven't talked about yet on the bridge is re-hooking or restabilizing utilities that run on the bridge to cross I-5. Some of the utility conduit was also damaged, and our crews our bridge maintenance crews spent a fair amount of time re-stabilizing that conduit onto the bridge.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, it appears like officials have just wrapped up the latest on the Washington train derailment. They did mention that a partial I-5 reopening is possible soon. We'll show you some video from this morning when they were removing the train cars. Here you go. You can see it right here. This is not live. Again, this is from this morning. The numbers have not changed so far. 3 people died in the train crash in DuPont, Washington. Dozens, though, injured. Reports still stand at about, I believe, more than 70 were sent to local hospitals. So there you see the train cars. I'm not quite sure what those A's mean on them, what they stand for. Maybe it's just marking the number or the order of cars from the crash scene. So again, this video is from this morning. Still somewhat disturbing images, I would say, when you look at the mangled train cars, where you know that people who work for Amtrak were in the vehicles and passengers when it just barreled off the freeway overpass there on Monday. So we are at day 3 in the investigation. The National Transit Safety Board still has a team of investigators out there determining exactly what happened. Hi everybody, good afternoon. Pilar Arias here with Fox News Now. Hope you're having a great Wednesday. Feel free to let me know where you are watching from, how you found our stream, whether it was YouTube, our Facebook page, perhaps Twitter. We're on Twitter as well. Fox10phoenix.com. Let me know. I'd love to hear from you. In the meantime, I am going to show you a live shot of our nation's capital. Take a look there. Lots of celebration at the White House just moments ago, celebrating tax reform. So I would like to actually replay that for you because it was a lot of the old traditional term, as you would call it, pomp and circumstance. We did record this live earlier, and we had it on our Facebook Live, the Fox 10 Phoenix page. We are re-airing it for you in case you happen to have missed it. Again, everyone, the camera is moving around because this was recorded live earlier. Just wanted to let you all know.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, accompanied by the Vice President, the Speaker of the House, and the Senate Majority Leader.
People right behind me. They've worked so long, so hard. It's been an amazing experience, I have to tell you. hasn't been done in 34 years, but actually really hasn't been done because we broke every record. It's the largest, I always say the most massive, but it's the largest tax cut in the history of our country, and reform, but tax cut. Really something special. And I noticed this just came out 2 minutes ago. They handed it to me. AT&T plans to increase U.S. capital spending $1 billion and provide $1,000 special bonus to more than 200,000 U.S. employees, and that's because of what we did. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good. And I have a whole list of accomplishments that the group behind me have done in terms of this administration and this Congress, but you've heard it before. Records all over the place, and that will continue, and then some because of what we did. But $3.2 trillion, just think of it, in tax cuts for American families, including doubling the standard deduction and doubling the child tax credit. The typical family of four earning $75,000 will see an income tax cut of more than $2,000. They're going to have $2,000, and that's, in my opinion, going to be less than the average. You're going to have a lot more than that. One thing very important for the farmers, the great farmers and the great small business owners that were forced to sell their businesses at bargain basement numbers, we have provided, for the most part, estate taxes wiped out so they can keep their farms in the family, and that to me is a very big factor, very big. This is going to mean companies are going to be coming back. You know, I campaigned on the fact that we're not going to lose our companies anymore. They're going to stay in our country, and they're going to stay in our country. And you've been seeing what's been happening even at this prospect. But they have tremendous enthusiasm right now in this country, and we have companies pouring back into our country, and that means jobs, and it means really the formation of new, young, beautiful, strong companies. So that's going to be very, very important. The pass-throughs you know all about, and the small businesses are going to be big beneficiaries. We are going to bring at least $4 trillion back into this country, money that was frozen overseas and in parts and worlds, and some of them don't even like us, and they had the money. Well, they're not going to have the money long. And so it's really, I guess it's very simple. When you think, you haven't heard this expression, but we are making America great again. You haven't heard that, have you? I want to have them get up and get the glamour and the glory, and I just want to have a few of them come up, and they'll speak for a little while short. If the shorter, the better. That way we can get all of you. We'll get everybody up, right? But I want to thank Mitch McConnell. I want to thank, what a job. What a job. And I want to thank Paul. They're going to speak. They're going to say a few words, but Paul, Ryan, and Mitch, it was a little team. We just got together, and we would work very hard, didn't we? Huh? It seems like it was a lot of fun. It's always a lot of fun when you win. If you work hard and lose, that's not acceptable. But I'm just going to name a few names, and then some of them will come up. But people that I saw so much over the last month, and really over the last almost year, because when you think of it, we haven't even been a year. And we did the largest tax cut in our history. I hate to say this, but we essentially repealed Obamacare because we got rid of the individual mandate, which was terrible. And that was a primary source of funding of Obamacare. And Anwar, so a friend of mine, oh, congratulations. And Dan, where's Dan? What?
Don, right behind you.
No, and Don, too. Where's Dan?
Thank you.
Where's Dan?
You're not here.
Okay.
Lisa Murkowski's over.
I'll tell you, between Dan and Don and Lisa, you've done a very great job. So a friend of mine called up about Anwar. He's in the Opus. He said, you didn't get Anwar. And I said, tell me about Anwar. He said, we've been trying to get that passed. The whole country, the world, they tried in Ronald Reagan. They tried with the Bushes. They tried with everybody. They never got Anwar. But we got Anwar in this bill. So we have Anwar. We have mandate. And we have the tax cut, and we have the reform. I mean, when you add up the size of this bill, it's really great. So, Lisa, thank you very much. Lisa Murkowski. So, John Cornyn, the great Chairman Orrin Hatch. Great job, Orrin. Wow. Orrin is a special person. Tim Scott, who has been so incredible. He's going to say a few words. Where's Tim? Where's Tim? Yeah, you pick it up. He's younger than I am. Thank you, Tim. Yeah, we're just going to go through it. I have it mostly memorized, but Tim Scott has been great. John Thune. Where's John? John. Great job, John. Rob Portman, a real student of the tax world. Rob, thank you very much. I want to thank, I said hello to John Cornyn, Pat Toomey. We rode together in Pennsylvania, but Pat, where's Pat? Pat, great job. He knows his business. Susan Collins, we want to thank. Susan's around someplace. Susan. Thank you, Susan. All friends. I mean, I look at these people. It's like we're warriors together. Christy Noem on the house. We have Christy Noem and Diane Black.
At the bottom of the hour, we are planning to bring you Senator Mark Warner's floor speech on the Senate floor. So just to let you know, that is the plan for the bottom of the hour.
Kevin McCarthy. Kevin, what a job, Kevin. We had fun. Did we have a good time? Steve Scalisi's braver than all of us. He's braver. Where is he? Oh boy, I don't know. He had a rougher year than most of us, but it's a hell of a way to lose weight, Steve. You said you lost. It's not a good way. We love you, Steve. Great job. Great job. Kevin Brady. Kevin Brady. So maybe what I'll do is, and by the way, I mentioned AT&T, but many companies have come forward and saying they're so happy and they're going to be doing similar announcements. We're going to see something that's going to be very special. We're bringing the entrepreneur back into this country. We're getting rid of all the knots and all the ties, and we're going to see. You're going to see what happens. And ultimately, what does it mean? It means jobs, 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 jobs. So it's going to be really a very special period of time. We're in a very special period of time, and it's going to be even more so. I want to thank everybody behind me. Maybe I could start with Mitch, and then we'll go to Paul, and then we're going to have a few of the folks come up and say a few words, and we'll have a little fun. Okay? Thank you. Mitch, how about you starting?
Well, let me just say, Mr. President, you made the case for the tax bill, but this has been a year of extraordinary accomplishment for the Trump administration. We've cemented the Supreme Court right of center for a generation. Mr. President, thanks to your nominees, we put 12 circuit court judges in place, the most since the circuit court system was established in 1891. You hold the record. You've ended the overregulation of the American economy. And that, coupled with what we did last night and what the House finished this morning, means America is going to start growing again. Thank you, Mr. President, for all you're doing.
First of all, what this represents is a promise that each and every one of us made to the American people last year is a promise that is kept today. Something this big, something this generational, something this profound could not have been done without exquisite presidential leadership. Mr. President, thank you for getting us over the finish line. Thank you for getting us where we are. Really. I just want to quickly just say thanks, because this has been such a team effort from everybody. I want to thank Gary Cohn and Steve Mnuchin from the President's economic team for what they did to get us here. I want to thank my partner, Mitch McConnell, over in the Senate for getting us to where we are. And I want to thank these two chairmen, Orrin Hatch and Kevin Brady. Thank you so much for your leadership on this. It is really simple. The message to the hardworking taxpayers of America is your tax relief is on its way. That is what's happening here. The message to the families in America who've been struggling paycheck and paycheck, your tax rates are going down and your paychecks are going up. This is the kind of relief that Americans deserve. This is the kind of tax reform and tax cuts that get our economy growing to reach its potential. This gets us better wages, bigger paychecks, a simpler tax system. This gets the American economy competitive in the global economy. This is one of the most important things we could do for all of the people we represent. This is generational, and we're so excited that we're going to launch next year this fantastic tax reform so that the American people can see how we can truly reach our economic growth and our economic potential. And if it weren't for all the leadership of the men and women up here, this would not have been made possible. But lastly, I just want to thank the American people. I want to thank the American people for putting their trust in us, for giving us this chance and this ability to make this moment possible. Thank you very much.
A man who's been working very hard, thank you, Paul, very, very hard for a long period of time, and last night was very much a culmination, but I don't know if we'll have bigger moments, but we hope to. We're going to try. A very special guy and great friend of mine, Vice President Mike Pence.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for those kind words, but more importantly, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your boundless faith in the American people. And thank you for keeping your promise to see this Congress deliver the largest tax cut in American history before Christmas of this year. Merry Christmas, America. To members of our cabinet, to Leader McConnell, to Speaker Ryan, to all these members of Congress, thank you. Thank you not only for being here today for this special moment, but thank you for your leadership and support throughout this year. I truly do believe, Mr. President, that this will be remembered as a pivotal moment in the life of our nation. A day when the Congress answered your call and made history. But honestly, I would say to the American people, President Trump has been making history since the first day of this administration. We've been rebuilding our military, standing with our veterans. And just last week, President Trump signed one of the largest investments in our national defense since the days of Ronald Reagan. We've been defending our borders, upholding the rule of law. Illegal crossings on our southern border are down by more than 50%. And President Trump has been restoring American credibility on the world stage, standing with our allies and standing up to our enemies. As the President reflected earlier today, our NATO allies are paying more toward their common defense. North Korea is more isolated than ever before. This President's put Iran on notice and put the war on Afghanistan on a path to victory. And thanks to the leadership of this Commander-in-Chief and the courage of our armed forces, ISIS is on the run. Their capital has fallen.
All right, everybody, we are going to take you live to the Senate floor.
Across Syria and Iraq. But what brings us here?
Over the last several weeks, a growing chorus of irresponsible and reckless voices have called for President Trump to shut down Special Counsel Mueller's investigation. At first, these calls came from the fringes of our political discourse, those who would refuse to put our country and our security before base political instincts. Earlier this year, many of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle were right to push back on these misdirected calls and urge that the special counsel be allowed to do his job without interference. However, in recent weeks, those voices seem to be growing in stridency and in volume. Just this weekend, one major news organization suggested that Special Counsel Mueller could be involved in a coup against the president. One senior advisor at the White House has now outrageously alleged that the fix was in against Donald Trump from the beginning. Those statements are reckless, they are inappropriate, and they are extremely worrying. They are at odds with the president's own lawyers who have pledged to cooperate with the special counsel. Beyond being irresponsible, the seemingly coordinated nature of these claims should alarm us all, particularly since in recent days these baseless accusations have been repeated by several members of the House of Representatives. I believe it is up to every member of this institution, Republican or Democrat, to make a clear and unambiguous statement that any attempt by this president to remove Special Counsel Mueller from his position or to pardon key witnesses in any effort to shield them from accountability or shut down the investigation would be a gross abuse of power and a flagrant violation of executive branch responsibilities and authorities. These truly are red lines and simply cannot allow them to be crossed. Let's take a moment and remember why Special Counsel Mueller was appointed in the first place and why it remains so critical that he be permitted to finish his job without obstruction. Recall last spring, we were all reeling from a series of confounding actions by this president, beginning with the firing of FBI Director Jim Comey on May 9th. Mr. Comey was fired just 2 months after publicly revealing the FBI's ongoing investigation of the Trump campaign and, as we'd find out later, after several attempts by this president to improperly influence Director Comey. Try to put yourself back into those dangerous days. Director Comey's dismissal was met with confusion and widespread condemnation. We needed a stabilizing action from our nation's law enforcement leadership. We needed some certainty that the facts would be found and brought to light, regardless of what they were. 8 days after Mr. Comey's firing, Trump appointee and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein appointed Robert Mueller to oversee the investigation into, quote, any links and/or coordination between the Russian government and individuals associated with the campaign of President Donald Trump, and, quote, any matters that arose or may arise directly from the investigation. His appointment reassured Americans that there would be a full and thorough law enforcement investigation. The announcement was met with support on both sides of the aisle and received nearly universal praise. In fact, many of the same people who are attacking him today praised Mr. Mueller's appointment just months ago. Indeed, there is much to praise. The fact is that Robert Mueller has impeccable credentials as a man of the law. He has assembled a team that includes some of the nation's best investigators, and he is leading the investigation with the professionalism it deserves. Mr. Mueller is a dedicated Vietnam War veteran and a lifelong Republican, appointed to his current role by Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, also a Republican. In fact, all of the major players to date in this investigation, former Director Comey, current FBI Director Wray, Rosenstein, and even Attorney General Sessions, who has had to recuse himself, are all Republicans. The charges that some have made that somehow Democratic political bias have crept into this investigation are baseless, given the makeup of the leadership team. In recent weeks, much has been made of some political opinions expressed by an FBI agent during the election last year. This specious line of argument conveniently ignores the fact that as soon as Mr. Mueller learned about these comments, he immediately removed that agent in question from the investigation. If anything, this incident only adds to Mr. Mueller's credibility as a fair and independent investigator. Mr. President, I stand here as the Vice Chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. We are in the midst of our own investigation into Russian incursion, and I'm proud of the way that Chairman Burr and our committee has taken on this very difficult task. We've made tremendous progress uncovering the facts of Russian interference in our elections. Our committee's work helped expose the dark underbelly of disinformation on many of our social media platforms. We've successfully pressed for the full accounting of Russian cyber efforts to target our state electoral systems. And despite the initial denials of any Russian contacts during the election, this committee's efforts have helped uncover numerous and troubling high-level engagements between the Trump campaign and Russian affiliates, many of which have only been revealed in recent months. We've got a lot of work to do yet, but our committee has gone out of its way to ensure continued bipartisan backing for this effort, and I'm committed to seeing the effort through. However, it should be very clear that our committee cannot and will not stand as a substitute for Mr. Mueller's investigation. As Chairman Burr and I have noted on numerous occasions, the FBI is responsible for determining any criminal activities related to this inquiry. As such, Mueller has already moved to indict 2 individuals and has negotiated 2 additional guilty pleas. There is an investigative path. This is an investigative path reserved solely for law enforcement, and it is essential that it be permitted to go on unimpeded. The country, no doubt, remains severely divided on the question of the last election. However, the national security threat facing us today should demand that we rise above partisan differences. No matter the political divide, surely each of us and all Americans should want to know the truth of what happened during last year's election, and no doubt we all want to know that as quickly as possible. Now, the President has long called the investigation into the Russian meddling into the 2016 election a witch hunt, and he's done much to discredit the intelligence community's unanimous assessment of Russian interference in our election. The failure of this White House to lead a whole-of-government approach to prevent this type of election interference in the future, either by the Russians or some other adversary, defies understanding. The President's refusal to accept the intelligence community's assessment and his blatant disregard for ensuring that Russia never again infiltrates our election process has been unnerving and cause for significant concern. In recent days, the President has said he is not considering removing Special Counsel Mueller. But the President's track record on this front is a source of concern. I'm certain that most of my colleagues believed that he wouldn't fire Jim Comey either. Firing Mr. Mueller or any other of the top brass involved in this investigation would not only call into question this administration's commitment to the truth, but also to our most basic concept, rule of law. It also has the potential to provoke a constitutional crisis. In the United States of America, no one is above the law, not even the President. Congress must make clear to the President that firing the special counsel or interfering with his investigation by issuing pardons of essential witnesses is unacceptable and would have immediate and significant consequences. I hope my concerns are unfounded. In many ways, I hoped I would never have to make this kind of speech, but there are troubling signs. It is critical that all of us, as elected officials and as citizens, speak up against these threats now, before it's too late. Thank you, Mr. President. With that, I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
All right, everybody, we'll keep an eye on the Senate floor here for just a moment before we move on to other news of the day. All right, it's appeared that that is all they had for us. So you guys are taking a live look at Phoenix, Arizona. If you're watching us on YouTube, thanks a bunch. While you're here, feel free to subscribe if you haven't already. That way, anytime we go live, you will be alerted. Hey, everybody, what are you up to this Wednesday afternoon? Where are you watching us from? We love getting that information from you guys, hearing where you're watching from, how you found out about us. We like to know how many people actually aren't in Phoenix or in Arizona. In the meantime, I'm preparing some other stories for you. Okay, so who has or who knows a gamer in your life? Anybody? Well, we have some last minute holiday gift ideas if you do.
The holiday shopping season is almost over, but a lot of folks are still getting their gifts together, and we have a few suggestions. If you're looking to stuff the stockings full of retro gaming joy, the Retron 5 by Hyperkin lets you experience all the classic Nintendo and Sega games. It is compatible with old NES, SNES, Genesis, and Game Boy cartridges, and will play in HD. And you don't have to blow into the cartridges either to make them work. Every gamer needs a good headset. Afterglow makes good quality headsets that range from $14.99 to $99.99, many with Bluetooth connectivity for wireless use. One of the most important tools for those who like to line up late at night to play online shooters like Counter-Strike are mouse pads. The bigger, the better. The size can help PC gamers get more precision in their mouse movements, making more accuracy in their clicks. The Roccat Taito Control Endurance Gaming Mousepad fills that need easily and comes in 2 sizes. And for the wannabe console pro, Scuff makes professional controllers for players on PlayStation and Xbox consoles. These are fully customizable and generally add extra paddle buttons on the bottom of the controller for ease of use. And that's your insider's cheat code to last-minute holiday shopping. In New York, Eamon Dignam, Fox News.
Hey, Eamon, thanks so much for that report. We don't always get to bring you the lighter news or the more fun news, but right now I can, and we just did. So I'm not a gamer anymore. I used to be in the days of Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo and Nintendo 64, and I do remember the days of having to blow into some game cartridges, so it made me laugh when I saw that. I'll bring you another feel-good holiday story. Some airmen made it home just in time for the holidays. Take a look.
It's not Santa's sleigh, but it is flying in with a great gift. The sign says it all. Welcome home, Daddy. The real thing.
On FaceTime you can see him and he's so far away, but then now you can see him, but I can't hug him. It's terrible. I need to hug him.
At MacDill Air Force Base, the crew returns after a 2-month deployment to the Middle East.
It's just awesome. It's the best Christmas present we could have ever asked for. We were just really hoping he would make it here before the holidays, and so couldn't ask for anything better.
there's some catching up to do.
The first time that I've actually, been away with him being able to talk and express himself and kind of know what he wants, so it's been very emotional to come back to it.
Just in time for Christmas.
Very fortunate, because I know there's a lot of people out there that are still currently deployed that won't be able to come back and spend time with their families, so it's a pretty awesome feeling.
It's not just the service member who sacrifices, it's their family too.
Having him home anytime is the difference between having a fulfilling life and waiting and remembering that you're doing this to be fulfilled again later so that everyone else can have the same kind of life too.
They don't know about next year, but this Christmas, they're together.
It means a lot. It means being able to share, being able to celebrate, just being in family.
Lloyd Towers, Fox 13 News.
That is just one of those feel-good holiday stories. My dad is a Vietnam veteran, and he said that was the hardest part about being in the military, about being in the Army, was being away from home for the holidays. And back then, in the 1960s, we call it snail mail now, but could you imagine being overseas and having to wait for a letter or a package from somebody that you love back home? All right, well, we are going to switch gears to some more serious news, some church reaction following some things that are going on there.
It was all about protecting the church, protecting the priest.
Catholic sex abuse victims reacting strongly to the death of Cardinal Bernard Law, the man many hold responsible for covering up the Catholic sex abuse scandal in Boston. He died early Wednesday in Rome at 86, prompting a statement of prayers from Pope Francis, saying in part, quote, "I raise prayers for the repose of his soul, that the Lord God, who is rich in mercy, may welcome him in his eternal peace." But abuse victims and their families aren't so forgiving.
I cannot ever turn my back on my faith, but I can't find it in my heart to forgive.
It comes up every day. There's not a single day that goes by that I don't remember what happened to me.
The scandal broke in 2002 when the Boston Globe reported abuse was taking place on a massive scale, and Law, then Archbishop in Boston, knew about it, shuffling abusive priests from church to cover their crimes. He eventually left Boston in disgrace, but was later named head of the Basilica of St. Mary Maggiore, one of 4 principal basilicas in Rome. Law's successor as Archbishop, Cardinal Sean O'Malley, acknowledged the mixed feelings about Law's passing, saying it's a sad reality that his legacy will always be tied to the abuse scandal.
It's a difficult situation, but he's a person and he's going to pay the price, whatever that might be.
Despite the controversy, Cardinal Law will be honored with a full cardinal's funeral in the Vatican on Thursday, and that will include the traditional funeral address to be delivered by Pope Francis. In Milan, Italy, Amy Kellogg, Fox News.
All right, that was Amy Kellogg with that report. I have a visual of Senator Al Franken, I believe is a live picture on the Senate floor. So I'm going to bring that, guys, to you. I do not know at this time exactly what he's talking about, but let's take a listen.
For innovation, economic growth, and freedom of expression that it has always been. Perhaps it was the complex nature of these issues or even the financial incentive to turn a blind eye, but when I came to the Senate, very few members of the Senate and of Congress were talking about corporate consolidation or commercial privacy or net neutrality, issues that have gained much deserved attention in more recent years. Whatever the reason for other members' hesitance, I felt it was incumbent upon me to get into the weeds on these issues so that I could be a leader in the Senate and ultimately address the concerns of ordinary Minnesotans. That's why when the interests of the American consumer have clashed with the desires of powerful telecommunications and technology companies, I've always tried to put the public first and to fight on their behalf by shedding light on corporate abuses and using all the tools at my disposal to curb them. Again, it is through my work on the Judiciary Committee, and more specifically my work on media and technology policy, that I believe my perspective from my previous career has been of most value. Comcast's proposal to acquire NBCU immediately made me uncomfortable because I'd seen their motives for this deal before. In 1993, during my 13th season at Saturday Night Live, the big three networks, NBC, CBS, and ABC, pressured Congress to change the rules that had previously prevented them from owning any of the shows that they aired in prime time. The purpose of the rules had been to prevent the networks from prioritizing their own shows over others and otherwise harming competing programming. Unsurprisingly, after the rules were repealed, the networks, contrary to their guarantees, to their assurance that they had given Congress, they began giving the shows that they owned preferential treatment. Now, at the time, Seinfeld, which aired on NBC and was not owned by NBC, it had been done before produced before the rules had changed. Seinfeld was the #1 show on television, which made the Thursday night time slot following Seinfeld the most valuable real estate on television. And I watched as shows that eventually wound up in that premium location were all owned, at least in part, by NBC. So when I became a senator, one of the first major deals that I opposed was Comcast's acquisition of NBC Universal. As in the case of AT&T's current bid to buy Time Warner, this deal was about giving one company the ability to control both the programming and the pipes that carry it. I knew from my time in the media that a combined Comcast-NBC Universal would have strong incentives to favor its own programming over that of others and restrict competing distributors from accessing that programming. I knew that these incentives would hurt competing content creators, inhibit the free flow of information, and ultimately harm consumers. Unfortunately, I was not wrong. In the years after its acquisition of NBC Universal, Comcast repeatedly violated the terms of its agreements with the FCC and the Department of Justice, favoring its own news programming over its competitors in Comcast's channel lineup, and failing to live up to its promises regarding offering an affordable standalone broadband package, racial diversity in programming. They did not live up to their promises there, and online video distribution. And because merger conditions are extremely difficult and costly to enforce, competition and consumers were harmed in the process. Comcast's behavior in the wake of acquiring NBC Universal was one of the major reasons I then opposed its proposal to turn around and buy Time Warner Cable a couple of years later. It was also one of the major reasons that I believe that that later deal was ultimately dropped after objections from the FCC and the Department of Justice. For a long time in the Senate, it was a lonely battle. For over a year, I was the only senator to oppose Comcast's proposal to buy Time Warner Cable, a deal that would have given the combined company 57% of the broadband market. But advocates and ordinary citizens raised their voices, and together we were able to stop the deal. Most recently, I've led my colleagues in scrutinizing AT&T's proposed acquisition of Time Warner, and I've once again called on regulators to move to block the deal for the inevitable harm it will cause to competition and consumers. I've been proud to lead these efforts, and I leave here in a much different environment than when I arrived. I know that there are strong voices in the Senate that will carry on the fight when I am gone. These efforts to slow down and halt media consolidation are part of a very important, larger development we've seen in our country. In recent years, there has been a resurgence in the American public's and, in turn, Congress's interest in combating corporate consolidation. When I first entered the Senate, I wasn't sure that most Americans understood what was at stake when these powerful companies wanted to combine. Vertical integration and antitrust law sounded like obscure, almost boring topics. But more and more Americans are getting educated about these issues, and more members of Congress are working to get Washington focused on how they affect the real lives of real people. Now, just look at the fight for net neutrality. For many of the same reasons that I oppose Comcast's acquisition of NBC Universal, I have long supported strong net neutrality rules to ensure that the internet remains a level playing field where everyone can participate on equal footing, free from discrimination by large internet service providers like Comcast, Verizon, and AT&T. Net neutrality preserves the internet as the engine for innovation that it has always been, and allows businesses of all sizes to thrive, even when they're up against the largest, most profitable corporation. Here's just one example that I found useful in explaining net neutrality. In 2005, three guys set up shop over a pizzeria in a strip mall in San Mateo, California, where they launched the now ubiquitous YouTube. Video sharing websites were in their infancy, but these guys already faced competition from something that preceded it called Google Video. But Google Video wasn't very good. Because of net neutrality, YouTube was able to compete with Google Video on a level playing field. The giant internet service providers treated YouTube's videos the same as they did Google's. And Google couldn't pay them to gain an unfair advantage, like a fast lane into consumers' homes. They were treated the same, neutrally. The content was neutral, net neutrality. People really liked YouTube. They preferred YouTube to Google Video, and YouTube thrived. And in fact, in 2006, Google bought it for stock valued at $1.65 billion. It's a nice chunk for three guys over a pizzeria in San Mateo. But it's not just tech companies and small businesses that rely on an open internet. In a submission to the FCC in 2014, a coalition that includes Visa, Bank of America, UPS, and Ford explained that, quote, every retailer with an online catalog, every manufacturer with online product specifications, every insurance company with online claims processing, every bank offering online account management, every company with a website, every business in America interacting with its customers online is dependent upon an open internet, unquote. I've repeated this quote on the floor and at rallies time and time again over the years because I think it perfectly exemplifies the importance of this issue. Preserving net neutrality is only controversial for the few deep-pocketed entities that stand to financially gain without it. If FCC Chairman Pai ultimately has his way, we'll be entering a digital world where the powerful outrank the majority, a world where a handful of multi-billion-dollar companies have the power to control how users get their information, and a world where the deepest pockets can pay for a fast lane while their competitors stall in the slow lane. For nearly 9 years, I have been calling net neutrality the free speech issue of our time because it embraces our most basic constitutional freedoms. And ironically, the kind of civic participation that has inspired so many of us in recent months and has affected real change, like in the fight for net neutrality and the successful efforts to save the Affordable Care Act, they have depended in no small part on a free and open internet. Now, in 2015, the FCC's vote to reclassify broadband providers as common carriers under Title II of the Communications Act didn't just mean good things for net neutrality, it also had important implications for consumer privacy. It gave the agency the authority and the responsibility to implement rules to protect Americans' privacy by giving consumers greater control of their personal data that is collected and used by their broadband providers. That was a big win. Republicans didn't see it that way. One of the first things they did this Congress was to repeal those rules, which was a huge blow to Americans' right to privacy. For my part, I have long believed that Americans have a fundamental right to privacy. I believe that they deserve both transparency and accountability from the companies that have the capacity to trade on the details of their lives. And should they choose to leave personal information in the hands of those companies, they certainly deserve to know that their information is being safeguarded to the greatest degree possible. This transparency and accountability should come from all the companies that have access to Americans' sensitive information. This includes internet service providers like Comcast and AT&T, but also edge providers like Google, Facebook, and Amazon. In 2011, I served as chair for the inaugural hearing of the Judiciary Subcommittee on Privacy Technology and the Law, a subcommittee that I founded after it became abundantly clear that our nation's privacy laws had failed to keep pace with rapidly evolving technologies. When people talked about protecting their privacy when I was growing up, they were talking about protecting it from the government. They talked about unreasonable searches and seizures, about keeping the government out of their bedrooms. They talked about whether the government was trying to keep tabs on the books they read or the rallies they attended. Over the last 40 or 50 years, we've seen a fundamental shift in who has our information and what they're doing with it. That's not to say that we still shouldn't be worried about protecting ourselves from government abuses, but now we also have relationships with large corporations that are obtaining, storing, sharing, and in many cases selling enormous amounts of our personal information. When the Constitution was written, the founders had no way of anticipating the new technologies that would evolve in the coming centuries. They had no way of anticipating the telephone, for example. And so the Supreme Court ruled over 40 years ago that a wiretap constitutes a search under the Fourth Amendment. The founders had no idea that one day the police
Again,
would
everybody,
be able
thanks
to
so much for being with Fox News Now this afternoon. You are watching Senator Al Franken live on the Senate floor. He will be stepping down January 2nd.
All this is a good thing.
So we are just listening to his remarks now and keeping tabs on all other breaking news across the country for you. Thanks for being with us.
The Constitution is often called a living document. But we have a long way to go to get to the point where our modern laws are in line with modern technology. My goal for the subcommittee was to help members understand both the benefits and privacy implications of emerging technologies, to educate the public and raise awareness about how their data are being collected, used, and shared, and if necessary, to legislate to fill gaps in the law. And when politics prevented legislation, I repeatedly pressed companies, many of them more than once, to be more transparent about how they were treating their customers' private information, including users' location data, web browsing histories, and even their finger and face prints. As consumer awareness has evolved, these companies have taken important steps to improve transparency of their use of Americans' personal information. But unfortunately, accumulating massive troves of information isn't just a side project that they can choose to halt at any given time. For many of them, it's their whole business model. We are not their customers, we are their product. Recently, we've seen just how scary this business model can be. In October of this year, the Judiciary Committee examined Russia's manipulation of social media during the 2016 campaign. And both the public and members of Congress were shocked to learn the outsized role that the major tech companies play in so many aspects of our lives, based primarily on the mass collection of personal information and complex algorithms that are shrouded in secrecy. Not only do these companies guide what we see, read, and buy on a regular basis, but their dominance, specifically in the market of information, now requires that we consider their role in the integrity of our democracy. And unfortunately, this fall's hearings demonstrated that they may not be up to the challenge that they have created for themselves. The size of these companies is not in isolation the problem, but I am extremely concerned about these platforms' use of Americans' personal information to further solidify their market power and consequently extract unfair conditions from the content creators and innovators that rely on their platforms to reach consumers. And as has become alarmingly clear in recent months, companies like Google, Facebook, and Amazon have unprecedented power to guide Americans' access to information and to potentially shape the future of journalism. It should go without saying that such power comes with great responsibility. Everyone is currently and rightfully focused on Russian manipulation of social media. But as lawmakers, it is incumbent upon us to ask the broader questions. How did big tech come to control so many aspects of our lives? How is it using our personal information to strengthen its reach and its bottom line? Are these companies engaging in anti-competitive behavior that restricts the free flow of information and commerce? Are they failing to take simple precautions to respect our privacy and to protect our democracy? And finally, what role should these companies play in our lives, and how do we ensure transparency and accountability from them going forward? Modern technology has fundamentally altered the way we live our lives, and it has given us extraordinary benefits. But as these companies continue to grow and evolve, challenges like those we've recently confronted in the Judiciary Committee will only grow and evolve with them. So we must now muster the will to meaningfully address the tough questions related to competition, privacy, and ultimately the integrity of our democracy. Now, I will not be here to ask those questions. I will do what I can to find the answers from the outside, but it's my colleagues in the Senate who must prioritize them going forward. There's simply too much at stake. And I know that they will do so with the help of a tireless advocacy community and the brilliant minds who've long contemplated these incredibly complex issues and ensured that lawmakers pay attention. And more importantly, they will do so with the support and encouragement of the American people. I've witnessed significant highs and significant lows in the fight to protect consumers' rights. But the most important lesson that I've learned along the way is that ordinary Americans can wield extraordinary power when they raise their voices. For this reason, and despite significant setbacks in recent months, I know that it is the public's interests that can ultimately prevail. Thank you, Mr. President. And I would suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
All right, everybody, good afternoon. Pilar Arias here with you again on Fox News Now. So I am 2.5 weeks into this job, right? 2.5 weeks, learn something new every day. That's what I love about being a journalist, being in this industry. But this is the first time I've ever completely run a show on my own where I have to punch up all the sources and play all the video. I don't know if you were watching News Now on Extra today, which is channel 45 if you have rabbit ears, cable channel 9, but I was trying to play some stories and the audio wasn't quite where it needed to be. So if you were watching and you were wondering what those stories are or you want to watch now, I have them for you. The first one we're going to play for you is the most recent story on the tax reform.
The motion is adopted.
An early Christmas gift for Republicans as Congress votes to overhaul the nation's tax code and deliver the GOP's bill to the president's desk before the holiday break. President Trump tweeting this morning, "The tax cuts are so large and so meaningful. The results will speak for themselves. Starting very soon, jobs, jobs, jobs."
It will be an incredible Christmas gift for hardworking Americans.
The House repeating its vote one day later after the Senate passed its version overnight, but with changes requiring the House to vote yet again.
There are these bizarre Senate rules. I won't go into the details.
Still, Republicans call the bill a major win. The final version cutting taxes for 80% of Americans, slashing the corporate rate from 35% to 21%, dropping the top individual rate to 37%, and repealing the Obamacare individual mandate.
The average family of four in America earning the median income is going to get a $2,059 tax cut. And when more than half of Americans are telling us that they're living paycheck to paycheck, that's real relief.
Yet Democrats say the bill is a crushing blow to the middle class.
Ultimately, the Republicans have taken what they call a once-in-a-generation opportunity on tax reform and squandered it on corporate welfare and tax cuts for the rich.
Lawmakers still have work to do before heading home for Christmas. A funding bill still needs to get passed this week to avoid a government shutdown. In Washington, Griff Jenkins, Fox News.
All right, thanks so much for that report, Griff Jenkins. Well, it's been months since Hurricane Harvey struck the Gulf Coast and impacted Texas, but some of the victims are still recovering. I have a good news story yet again, a furniture store helping some Harvey victims.
We thought we'd be gone for 2 or 3 days and be back because it'd be over with.
That's what Chris and Simeon Ustruck were thinking when they evacuated their home in Old Katy as Harvey moved in. And moved in he did.
The kitchen, it's the heart of our home.
The entire first floor flooded, forcing this family of 10 to move upstairs and live in a shared space for the last 4 months.
Before the hurricane, we used to go downstairs and watch TV on the couch and stuff like that.
Their couch pictured here tossed to the curb as the furniture left on the flooded level all had to go.
It's way more like crowded up here because before it was kind of like just us kids, but now like our parents are up here, so it's kind of crowded.
Crowded, yes, but a tree still stands decorated in this makeshift living room across from the family's shared microwave and pantry.
You can't cook anything at home.
But in the midst of this hardship that's still months from complete, a call came in to Simeon.
I said, thank you so much for everything y'all are doing for us. And she said, you need to thank the man upstairs.
A coworker of hers nominated the family for the Christmas giveaway at Gallery Furniture.
I was like, oh my gosh, wait, $10,000? Dang.
That can get a lot done with the whole house.
That's kind of pretty.
The family, minus 3 of their children, spending the afternoon looking for some new furniture.
It's a joy to us to be able to help them, and you know, the season of Christmas is about giving, so.
We hadn't even gotten to that point of thinking about furniture and how we're going to make this all happen. Just one day at a time. That's kind of been our motto.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Stephen Morgan, Fox 26 News.
Oh, my favorite part of that story is when that little girl's like, $10,000? That's awesome. I mean, when you're that age, it's a lot of money. When you're my age, that's a lot of money. All right. Unfortunately, some bad news out of Florida. An officer was dragged by a car on the run. Let's watch that report.
You got ID?
Body camera footage shows just how quickly a call about a possible overdose changed into a life or death struggle for a Pembroke Pines officer Tuesday morning.
3-4, it's going to be in front of Cambridge and Mike. Whoa, 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 whoa!
Just after 8:30, a suspect refusing an officer's orders. The officer then holding on to the car as it starts accelerating. It happened in Century Village at 1110 Southwest 125th Avenue. Officer John Cusack's body camera showing a man hitting the gas, tires squealing. He was later identified as Thomas Cabrera. He took off, hitting speeds of 60 miles per hour.
You got ID?
Body camera footage shows just how quickly a call about a possible overdose changed.
Sorry about that, guys. Restarted the story for you.
Officer Tuesday morning.
3-4, it's going to be in front of Cambridge and Mike. Whoa, 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 whoa!
Just after 8:30, a suspect refusing an officer's orders. The officer then holding on to the car as it starts accelerating. It happened in Century Village at 1110 Southwest 125th Avenue. Officer John Cusack's body camera showing a man hitting the gas, tires squealing. He was later identified as Thomas Cabrera. He took off, hitting speeds of 60 miles per hour. The 19-year veteran of the force clinging to the driver's side door, dragged for half a mile before his body camera dislodges and falls to the ground.
You can only imagine being dragged for half a mile and on the pavement, and the damage that you would sustain not just to your clothing but to your body.
A surveillance camera on the gate capturing the moment Cusack fell into the street. Just as responding officers showed up, some tending to him, others chasing Cabrera. 7 Sky Force then picking up the action as police gave chase from I-75 north to 595 east. Speeds hitting up to 105 miles per hour. Before Cabrera was finally stopped on 441, he reportedly admitted to arresting officers that he and his fiancée had been doing heroin and cocaine. The officer was hospitalized, but considering just how quickly this situation escalated, he's incredibly fortunate.
Officer Cusack was doing what every police officer does day in and day out. Try to save the life of a perfect stranger, and in the process, he almost lost his own.
All right, everybody, that was Lorena Estrada reporting in Florida. I want to give you now a live look at our nation's capital. This is pretty cool. Again, I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. They're on the East Coast. They're 2 hours ahead of where we are. It's 3:20 here, so it's already evening there. And I mean, look at this. I think it's beautiful. It's all lit up inside, and it's been a all eyes on Capitol Hill type of day. So I'm going to take you back to the Senate floor where Bernie Sanders is talking. Let's take a listen.
Wealthy campaign contributor, you do have a whole lot to celebrate. And maybe if you're one of the 6,000 lobbyists here in Washington, D.C., who helped write the bill, I guess they're celebrating a lot today. But if you are one of the vast majority of the American people who are in the middle class, you should not be celebrating today, and in fact, you should be pretty nervous. The passage of this legislation marks a great victory for the Koch brothers and other wealthy campaign contributors who will see, at a time of massive income and wealth inequality, huge tax breaks for themselves. In other words, the wealthiest people will become much wealthier. Meanwhile, the deficit, what is owed by our kids and our grandchildren, will increase by $1.5 trillion as a result of this bill. And the largest and most profitable corporations, companies like Apple, Microsoft, Pfizer, General Electric, who despite record-breaking profits, they are going to see very, very large tax breaks to the tune of many billions of dollars. Now, at a time when the very wealthy are becoming much richer, tens of millions of American families are struggling to keep their heads above water economically. 40 million Americans are living in poverty. The Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center tells us that in terms of this legislation, 83% of the tax benefits will go to the top 1% by the end of the decade. 83% of the tax benefits go to the top 1% who are already doing phenomenally well. 60% of the benefits will go to the top 1/10 of 1%. Meanwhile, at the end of 10 years, some 92 million middle-class households will be paying more in taxes. And then on top of all of that, as the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people, this bill will result in 13 million Americans losing their health insurance. And I understand the president was really excited about this. Hey, what a great day. 13 million more Americans are losing their health insurance when we are the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people. But with the ending of the individual mandate, what all of the experts tell us is that health care premiums will go up. So if you're an average person out there, your health care premiums will very likely go up as a result of this legislation. Meanwhile, starting next year, I'm not talking about 10 years from now, starting next year, some 8 million middle-class families will pay more in taxes. Doesn't it say a lot about Republican priorities when they make permanent the tax breaks for corporations? Those are permanent, and yet they make temporary the tax breaks for working families, which will expire in 8 years. Furthermore, I would hope that every American is listening closely to what Speaker of the House Paul Ryan is talking about. And I have to give Ryan credit for being pretty honest about the intentions of the Republican Party. Just this morning, he was on ABC saying what he has said for quite a while, and that is that the Republican plan is a two-step approach. Step number one, passing the legislation that passed last night here and today in the House. Step number two is having run up a deficit of $1.5 trillion. They are now going to come back and offset that deficit by making massive cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. According to Ryan, they got a two-step program. Step one, massive tax breaks to the rich and large corporations, run up the deficit by $1.5 trillion. Step number two, offset that deficit by cutting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. How unspeakable and outrageous is this plan? How much does it go against what the American people want? Giving huge tax breaks to billionaires, to the Trump family, to the Koch brothers, and then paying for those tax breaks by cutting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Mr. President, there are millions of senior citizens and people with disabilities in Vermont and all across this country who today are struggling to buy food, to heat their homes, to buy the prescription drugs they need because they're trying to survive on $12,000, $13,000, $14,000 a year Social Security. There are people who have worked their entire lives and have exhausted themselves as they approach retirement. Do not tell those people who live on $12,000, $13,000 a year Social Security that you're going to cut their benefits through a chained CPI or some other mechanisms in order to give tax breaks to billionaires. How outrageous that would be. Don't tell older workers, many of them with health problems, having worked 20, 30, 40 years, that you're going to give billions of dollars in tax breaks to Microsoft, Pfizer, or General Electric, but then you're going to ask them to work more years in order to be eligible for Medicare. Mr. President, I understand that every member of the Congress would like to go home for the holiday season, and so would I. This is the time of year where Vermont is really very, very beautiful. But the truth is that it would really be unconscionable for us to leave Washington after giving tax breaks to billionaires and large corporations while we ignore the enormous problems facing the middle class and working families of our country. Mr. President, when Donald Trump ended the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, the DACA program, nearly 800,000 lives were thrown into chaos and uncertainty. Without the legal protections afforded by the DACA program, hundreds of thousands of young people today are living in terrible fear and anxiety about losing the legal status that they currently have in the only country that they have ever known. These are young people who have grown up in the United States, gone to school in the United States, are working in the United States, are in our military. This is their home. It would be unspeakable to take away their legal status and subject them to deportation. Since the President's announcement in September, more than 11,000 people have already lost their protections under DACA, with approximately 22,000 set to lose their legal protections by the March 5th, 2018 deadline. Mr. President, these are hundreds of thousands of wonderful young people. We cannot turn our backs on them. We must deal with DACA before we leave for the holiday break. Any end-of-the-year spending agreement must address the fear and uncertainty caused by the administration's reckless actions, and a Clean Dream Act must be signed into law. Now, this is not just what Bernie Sanders wants. This is what the American people in overwhelming numbers want. A Quinnipiac poll came out just the other day in which 77% of the American people supported maintaining legal status for these young people and allowing them to move forward towards citizenship. 77%, and that is consistent with other polls that have been taken. A vast majority of Democrats, of Republicans, of independents understand that it would be incredibly cruel and harmful to our country in so many ways to deny legal status to the Dreamers. We cannot turn our backs on the Dreamers. We must address their crisis right now. Mr. President, it has been almost 3 months since funding for community health centers have lapsed. Our nation's 1,400 community health centers serve more than 27 million people in roughly 10,000 communities throughout this country. In my own state of Vermont, 1 out of 4 Vermonters get their primary health care, dental care, low-cost prescription drugs, mental health counseling at a community health center. How does it happen that the Republican leadership can spend months on a bill to give tax breaks to billionaires, but not address the lack of funding, the reauthorization of the Community Health Center program or the Children's Health Insurance Program, which provides health care to 9 million children? Mr. President, right now in this country, there are 1.5 million workers and retirees in multi-employer pension plans who could see the pensions that they work for their entire lives cut by up to 60%. People were promised these pensions a few years ago. In a disastrous act, Congress took away that promise, and working people could lose the pensions they were promised through up to 60% cuts in those pensions. Congress needs to act before the end of the year to make sure that no one in America in a multi-employer pension plan will see their pensions cut. Those are real issues impacting real people, but there are more. There was an article recently in the Washington Post, and what it said is that because of major cuts to the Social Security Administration, people with disabilities are not getting their claims processed in a timely manner. The result was that in 1 year, if you can believe it, 10,000 people with disabilities died before they got their claims processed. What the Republicans have been very active on is making sure that the Social Security Administration does not get the funding they need, which means that it is harder for people who have retired, people who have disabilities to get the information that they need or the claims that they have processed, get them processed in a timely manner. We must make sure that every senior and person with disability gets treated with dignity. We've got to restore adequate funding to the Social Security Administration. Mr. President, one of the great outrages that currently is taking place in this country, and it really is quite beyond belief, is that at a time when we live in a competitive global economy and when we need the best educated workforce in the world to be able to do the new jobs that are being created, which require more education, we have over 40 million people in our country, 40 million, who have left college or graduate school in debt and sometimes deeply in debt. I'm talking about people I have met who have gone to medical school or dental school, $300,000–400,000 in debt people graduate college $150,000 in debt. This is a crisis that is impacting millions of people. It's impacting our entire economy. It is an issue that must be addressed. Maybe, just maybe, before we give tax breaks to billionaires, we might want to significantly lower the debt burden that so many people in this country have in their student debts. Mr. President, again, this is the year 2017, soon to be 2018. This is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. And yet there are communities in Vermont, communities in Utah, communities all over this country that do not have adequate broadband service. Now, how do you start a business in a community if that community does not have rapid broadband or good cell phone service? And the answer is you don't, you can't, and that is one of the reasons why rural America is hurting so badly. We must invest in rural infrastructure, make sure that every community in this country has quality, affordable broadband. Mr. President, there is an opioid epidemic sweeping this country, impacting Vermont, my neighboring state, New Hampshire, West Virginia, Kentucky. All parts of this country are seeing people dying of overdoses from opioids and heroin. This is an epidemic that must be addressed. We can't simply walk out of here and leave communities all over this country without the resources that they need to treat people who are addicted and to prevent our young people from becoming addicts. We need to invest in treatment and prevention for the opioid epidemic. Mr. President, as we speak, there are over 30,000 vacancies in the Veterans Administration. And that means that we have got to make sure that every veteran in this country who goes to the VA gets the quality and timely health care that he or she needs. Can't turn our backs on the veterans. We've got to invest in the VA. Mr. President, the bottom line is that as much as all of us would like to get out of Washington and go home, we simply cannot turn our backs on tens of millions of working people and people in the middle class. It is not good enough to pass tax breaks for billionaires and then leave town. So I would hope, Mr. President, that the Republican leadership will immediately bring to this floor the legislation that we need to address the many crises facing the middle class of this country. And with that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
All right, everybody, good afternoon, and thanks so much for watching Fox News Now. When we first came on at 2 o'clock Arizona time, which was about an hour 40 minutes ago, we brought you the latest Washington train press conference, but I'm going to play that again for you all so everybody can get back up to speed.
We have Captain Dan Hall here and WashDOT Claudia Bingham Baker. They're going to just do a real brief update this time. If you could please save your questions for the end, all right? Thanks.
Hello again, everyone. Like Trooper Bova said, I do not have a lot of information to share at this time. However, we did want to make sure that everyone received an update on our progress. The locomotive is at its final destination. There will be no more traffic delays in the city of DuPont. All those roads are back open. DOT and the contractors are down below. They continue their work. There is still quite a bit of debris that they are removing. They are clearing the road now with the heavy machinery, and as they're moving it, they're actually finding more debris under the trees and dirt and so forth. So it is taking us a little bit longer than we had hoped. However, they are still working hard. The bridge repairs are done. They're not going to be doing any more repairs on the bridge itself. It will be safe for motorists once I-5 is open again. I do want you to know that this has been a very hectic scene. We are continuing to work hard to get these lanes cleared. It's been a coordinated effort between DOT and the contractors and all of those involved. We do want to thank the public for their patience. We are strongly working towards that. I do want to let you know at 3 o'clock today, so in just 2 hours, we should have a better idea and an estimate of a partial southbound opening. So again, that'll be at 3 o'clock. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Claudia Bingham-Baker with the State Department of Transportation's Olympic Region. I just thought I would share with you a couple of numbers just to give you a little glimpse into how DOT is responding to this. Down below us in the active scene, we have the following equipment being used right now just for cleaning up the highway. We have 2 sweepers, 2 articulated cranes, a Vector truck which clears out the stormwater drainage system, 5 dump trucks, and 2 excavators. We have 25 crew members down on the road helping to clear the highway right now. We have 24-hour shifts of 24 additional staff that are providing traffic control in the various intersections along the detour routes to try to help keep traffic moving. And we have many, many other DOT people behind the scenes strategizing, providing resources, responding to incidents, and clearing other collisions that are happening around our other state highways beyond just this site. We'd be happy to take any questions.
Claudia, at this point, what is the toughest thing that you're facing now that the locomotive is out of the way? What's the hardest part of this job, and what's the thing that's like the most time-consuming, the one that's really going to hold this whole process up?
What I have heard is that the debris from the collision is extensive. And as we are clearing areas along the highway and up on the hillside next to the bridge, we are finding additional debris. So we're doing our best to pull it out as quickly as we can. We keep discovering more. We also have several trees, as you had heard earlier, several trees that have to come down. So we are trying to do everything at once, but pulling out that debris is a very difficult and time-consuming process.
One follow, if you don't mind. The condition of the roadway itself, as you're uncovering that, how does the road look?
I'll defer.
I was recently down at the scene, and remarkably, the roadway, as we can see it now, there is still quite a bit of dirt, and the heavy equipment is still over that major impact point. But as of right now, it looks like it held up fairly well. We still have to do our final examination on it, but we are happy so far with at least what we're seeing.
Can you describe the gouge and what exactly caused that? How deep and wide it is?
Right, I have not seen the gouge, and right where that would be is where that heavy machinery is.
If there's any inspection of the bridge, who does that fall to? Does that fall to WashDOT, or is that Amtrak, Pelosi, and
WashDOT bridge engineers have been on the scene. They have inspected the bridge. The bridge is owned by Sound Transit, and I'm sure that they will send people out as well to look at it. However, we have a vested interest in ensuring that the bridge is safe and sound, and that we can safely open the lanes to traffic. So our bridge inspectors were involved in that.
Is any of the debris that you guys are clearing up, are you taking any of that in as evidence from the wreck, or how is that working? Is it just all going somewhere else?
Right, that's again coordinated by NTSB, but the debris is being taken to the same place where all the rail cars are, and so I'm sure that will be inspected just as if it's evidence.
So NTSB is down there watching?
Yes, yes.
When you took us through the list of things that had to happen before the road was back open, I think the last phase was that assessment. That's done by DOT.
Correct.
Claudia, can you take us through what that assessment will consist of? Is it a simple walkthrough? I mean, what is that last step?
Well, we have engineers down there that are looking at the roadway, and they are also repairing guardrail that's obviously crushed. But our maintenance crews have a lot of experience looking at the status of a highway, and it's pretty obvious if you have damage to a road that's caused by this massive of a collision. And so they can tell pretty quickly whether the road needs extensive repairs or whether it's more minor maintenance type work that needs to be done. And fortunately, we are seeing that the gouge that you've been hearing about is in the shoulder, which is asphalt, and more easily repaired than the main line, which is concrete. And as you just heard, we're not seeing a lot of extensive damage at this point to the concrete.
You talked about the bridge itself and its impact on the roadway. Looking good at that point. Has there been any assessment that you're aware of on the rail line itself on the bridge?
The rail line is owned by Sound Transit, and they would be the ones responsible for that. I can also tell you that one of the repairs that we haven't talked about yet on the bridge is re-hooking or restabilizing utilities that run on the bridge to cross I-5. Some of the utility conduit was also damaged, and our crews our bridge maintenance crews spent a fair amount of time re-stabilizing that conduit onto the bridge.
We have Captain.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much for being with us. A lot of their press conferences about the train derailment in Washington have been very brief, but they have been staying in touch with the media and letting everybody know the latest updates. So the good news out of that most recent press conference is that likely there could be a freeway, an interstate reopening there in Washington. So that is great news. Earlier today, Nancy Pelosi was joined by other people calling for the reauthorization of CHIP, which stands for the Child Health Insurance Program. So we'll let you listen to that press conference.
Children's hospitals and everyone who cares about the health of America's children today to say we're going to continue to stand up for our kids and families across America to the outrageous efforts of our Republican colleagues to give huge tax breaks to millionaires and billionaires and big corporations and let kids go by the wayside. It's unconscionable what they have done. And this is the first time in the history of the Children's Health Insurance Program that the Republicans did not operate in a bipartisan fashion, and they let the initiative lapse. When you think back across the history of CHIP that was adopted in the late 1990s, we've never had a multi-month lapse in funding for states and families across America. This is the worst case scenario. And let me tell you what has happened all year long from my seat at the Energy and Commerce Committee. Republicans were consumed the whole first part of the year with ripping health coverage away from families. They knew they had a September 30th deadline to reauthorize this important initiative. And they put it off, and they put it off, and they put it off. We had hoped we'd return from the August recess with the ability to sit down and talk about the reauthorization. It's always been bipartisan. But they were taken away by the Graham-Cassidy initiative to rip coverage away from families. So tick, tick, tick into September. When we got to the September 30th deadline, we did make some progress on the substance of the CHIP bill, the length of the reauthorization, but the pay-fors became the sticking point. And Republicans went back to their old recipe of trying to, on the one hand, say we're going to help kids, but their pay-fors rip coverage away from families at the same time. Medicare, going after the public health fund that helps fund vaccinations across America and helps us tackle the opioid addiction crisis. So this was a non-starter, and they knew that. And they jammed the bill through in early October here in the House. And at that point in time, they became so consumed with their tax bill The tax benefits to millionaires and billionaires and big corporations that, again, they've left kids out in the cold. Well, here we are, and we have states all across America that are now having to send out notices to families to say, we don't know if CHIP is going to be there for you. These are working families. They pay the co-payments. And now Republicans are going to instead give them this, give them the lump of coal. That's not acceptable in this country. This is not consistent with our values. At the holiday season, the end of the year, people want their kids, they want economic security. They want to understand that their daughter or son, their newborn baby can go see the pediatrician, can get the checkups that they need. That's smart policy. It's always been smart policy. And this is a real shame that they will have to live with. And it's important that parents and families and hospitals and everyone who cares about the future of this country understand the choice that our Republican colleagues made. Tax breaks and new loopholes for millionaires and billionaires not paid for. In fact, just a few months ago, they passed a bill on the IPAB that wasn't paid for. We're going to have a very significant emergency relief package, hopefully. It's not paid for. And yet, kids, they're holding to a different standard, and we can pay for it. There are bipartisan pay-fors. And it's time to act. If we don't act today or tomorrow, shame on the Republicans for taking us to this place.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Leader, is she here? Did she leave? Oh. Is she coming back?
Yes. You want to take some questions?
Okay, well, we're waiting for the leader, but we could take questions now if anybody has any. Or just hold your breath. Oh, we got a question here.
There seems to be some speculation that what might happen is that we attempt to have a short-term patch for the duration of this continuing resolution. As the program is expired entering into January, would that create real concrete problems over the next 2 or 3 weeks?
It certainly would, because CHIP needs to be reauthorized on a multi-year basis. It's not appropriate to patch for 1 month. Over at CMS, they're already spending just the kind of some leftover funds that they had. We've seen just in the past few days, the state of Alabama has said that they intend to begin to send out notices. I know my home state of Florida, we run out of money at the end of January. If they do not do a multi-year reauthorization, they're going to be leaving these families in the lurch, and that would be a shame.
Okay. Yes, in the back.
As you guys have this, we're getting pretty close to the spending bill, kind of last the end. You guys are going each year. Is there any signs that there's a
Well, I'll tell you what Nita Lowy told me this morning, who is our ranking member of appropriations, is that she was told that the discussions aren't even going to start till the tax bill is concluded, but maybe our leader can answer that. All right. Anyway, our leader will now talk about CHIP, and then maybe she can answer your question. Go ahead.
Oh, we got lots of coal here.
Yeah,
we got lots of coal. We got a lot of coal.
Okay, is this the Barbara Boxer thing? Excuse me for stepping outside, but we're trying to get this. Keep government open.
Oh, that's what the question was.
Okay.
Yes.
But let me just talk about CHIP for a moment, because this is a subject that many of us have been involved with for a long time. The health and well-being of our children is a primary responsibility for those of us in Congress. For me personally, my motivation to even be in politics is the 1 in 5 children who live in poverty in our country go to sleep hungry at night in America, the greatest country that ever existed in the history of the world. That we should be addressing their health issues is without question. And even if you are oblivious to the concerns, and it's amazing how much patience people have with other people suffering. You think their threshold is so high for other people suffering. But nonetheless, this issue should have been done by September 30th, when the reauthorization ended. The Republicans, because they wanted to pay for it in a very strange way, we couldn't come to agreement on it. And the reason that we had a problem is they were making children pay for children's health, For example, I'm really uncomfortable up here. I'll come back then. They were making children pay for children. For example, the Walden bill, which they still continue to put forth, is a bill that says in order to pay for the 5-year children's S-chip, 5-year, I still call it S-chip because we've been fighting this fight for many years. It used to be called State Children's Health Insurance Program. 5-year reauthorization of CHIP must be paid for. It sunsetted and it must be paid for. At the same time that the Republicans have given nearly a $1.5 trillion tax break permanently unpaid for to corporate America. So where is their value system? Corporations are people, okay, so corporate people get more attention than little children, but to that ratio of difference, that's intolerable. It's unconscionable. So anyway, right now again, we've been working for a few months to find respectable pay-fors for this, recognizing that it has to be paid for. We're working in a bipartisan way to get that done, but nonetheless, Republicans are still insisting on putting forth the Walden bill, which says we're going to take this, we're going to use money that would be used for childhood inoculations. For you, my friend from
Michigan.
I was thinking of her. I was thinking of Flint, but she's not Flint. But nonetheless, the Flint area, lead poisoning, all of those kinds of issues. They're taking that money to pay for children's health insurance program. We're saying that. Get out of here. I mean, really, what are you thinking or not thinking? So anyway, that is what has held it up now for nearly 3 months. And that's really unfortunate because, as has been said by my colleagues, states are running out of money. Some states have already run out of money. We must do this. We must do it very soon. And again, they're sticking with their bad plan. That was the same plan they put on the floor a while back that we all voted against because it was cannibalizing children's health care in order to pay for other children, health care, another version of children's health care. What was the question?
Whether we do it, the CR is we're gonna figure out how to keep government going.
Did you want to formulate it? Is that what, did that characterize your question?
Any progress on keeping government going?
Yeah, that's why I stepped out of the room.
Yeah.
The government will be open by the Republicans because they have the votes. They have the votes in the House, they have the Senate, and they have the White House. So they control whether government is open. We are very proud of the unity we have in our caucus, 100% yesterday against their terrible tax bill, which has implications on the budget side as well. And
all right, everybody, good afternoon again. Thanks for being with us on Fox News Now today. The latest we ever start our YouTube stream. What you're currently watching is 9 a.m. Arizona time, which is Mountain Standard Time, usually. But sometimes we start before that when breaking news happens. Remember, when breaking news does happen, you can find it here. Today, the most major news, tax reform passed. Passed in the House yesterday, passed in the Senate last night, then went back to the House. Today, it passed, and they had a big celebration at the White House in Washington. I'm out of here for now. More news now tomorrow. In the meantime, we will show you beautiful Phoenix, Arizona. Take care.